Well, hi, everybody. This is Brendan Gulick for Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated with the Buckeye Report. Sunday afternoon after the Buckeyes beat Notre Dame 21-10 over at the Shoe to open up the 2022 campaign last night. There are a lot of people that slept in this morning because there were a lot of celebrations that went pretty late into the night last night, celebrating not just an Ohio State win, but a win that perhaps surprised some people in the manner in which they won the game. The highly touted juggernaut offense really struggled, all things considered, based on what we've seen from them the last couple of years. They scored their fewest points in a game since 2018 with only 21. But I think what's most important is that when it mattered most, they found a way to get it done. And they scored a couple of touchdowns late in the game to take what was a 10-7 deficit and turn it into a 21-10 victory. Including a 14-play, 95-yard drive at the end of the game where Mayan Williams got a boatload of action, had almost 50 of his rushing yards for the entire game on that drive, and, of course, finishing off with a touchdown run that sealed the victory. Mayan Williams was really impressive last night, maybe one of the most impressive players on the offensive side. Before we give you a couple of defensive notes from the game last night, just obviously want to reference that, Jackson Smith-Njigba's potential leg injury is going to be a hot topic of conversation, I'm sure. The Buckeyes don't really talk publicly about injuries, so I'm not sure how much we're going to find out about the severity of that injury. But Ryan Day did say yesterday in his postgame press conference that he doesn't think it's severe. Obviously, Jackson went back into the game, so if it was that bad, he probably wouldn't have been able to go back in and play. And the hope is that he would be available for this upcoming week against Arkansas State. That said, if the Buckeyes are trying to play the long game here and he's their best offensive weapon, I wouldn't be surprised if there's any question whatsoever. I wouldn't be surprised if they decided, let's take a really conservative approach here. Ohio State's a 44-point favorite as the betting line opens against Arkansas State. They're going to be a huge favorite the following week against Toledo. It's most important for Jackson to get as healthy as he can for that Wisconsin game. So if he's good to go and he plays, I wouldn't be worried about it. But if there's any questions at all as to whether or not it's a good thing for him to play again this upcoming week, I would think the Buckeyes would probably take a pretty conservative approach with that. I'm kind of thinking back to what they did with C.J. Stroud last year when his right shoulder was just not perfectly right, and they sat him the Akron game. Takes 1 week off, and then the rest is history from the way he played last year. So we'll try to get an update of some kind for you. I'm sure it's going to be asked early on in Ryan Day's press conference on Tuesday. But again, they don't give too many details with that, so we'll see what we can learn on that front. Beyond that, some fun defensive notes after we've had a little chance to kind of digest what happened last night and the second half shutout that Ohio State's defense pitched when they needed it most. The talk all week from Marcus Freeman was, hey, we want to shorten the game. We want to run the football and try to establish something offensively. Well, they really didn't do that very well. They tried. Notre Dame ran it 30 times for just over 70 yards in the game. And in the second half, they averaged fewer than 2 yards per carry. On top of that, when they had chances with the Buckeye offense still not totally clicking early in the third quarter and certainly late in the second quarter, Notre Dame was just 1 of 6 on third downs in that second half. They couldn't extend drives and make life difficult on the Buckeyes. And I think Ohio State's defense gets all the credit for that. It's a group that has been under the most intense of magnifying glasses this entire offseason. And their first impression was a wild, resounding success. Really, really impressive defense from Jim Knowles' group. They obviously had a bad first play of the game that probably left a lot of us thinking, oh boy, here we go again. When you tacked on the 15-yard penalty on the end of that 54-yard completion, you felt like Notre Dame was just going to inevitably score a touchdown to start the game. And when that didn't happen, my immediate thought was, okay, that's good resiliency from this group. Now let's see how they respond as they move forward. There was some maybe defensive line rotation on the touchdown drive Notre Dame eventually did put together that I don't know if we'll see much more of moving forward. There was a drop-off there with rotating in the third group of defensive linemen. Those guys didn't play as many meaningful snaps the rest of the game. Combined with Mike Hall and Tommy Eichenberg's incredible performances, and frankly, Mike Hall's emergence. He didn't really play meaningful reps at defensive tackle last year. Obviously, he is the guy right now. Through the last couple weeks of camp, started to hear that he could be somebody that could really factor in as a starting lineman. You see him out there right away and, had a couple tackles for loss, had a big sack. Tommy Eichenberg, several tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Those 2 guys played unbelievably well. Lathan Ransom, really impressive last night. After Josh Proctor had an early snafu, Ransom saw a heck of a lot more time as the game went along and really looked good. I just thought from the front end to the back end of the defense, a really, really solid performance against an offense that had a great offensive line. That's probably Notre Dame's strength coming into the season. A quarterback in Tyler Buckner that, I know he made his first start. We talked about that a lot throughout the course of the week leading up to the game. I actually thought Buckner played pretty well. He certainly started the game well, 8 for 8 for 128 yards. And I give Tommy Reese a lot of credit for the way he designed those plays, because when the Irish couldn't run the ball between the tackles, they got it out of his hands quickly and were getting the ball to the perimeter. And that kind of settled him in. He's an athletic kid. He played with confidence. He was forced to try to move a little bit and felt some pressure. I just didn't think he made that many silly throws. And by the end of the game, when Notre Dame's offense basically just stalled, I didn't think that it was necessarily on Buckner that was the case. There were a lot of questions going into the week. How were the Buckeyes going to guard Michael Mayer? He had a good game, but he didn't kill Ohio State's defense the way that sometimes in the past star players for other teams have tortured the Buckeye defense. A really good job basically taking their best player out of the equation. And when it was time to be tough and show that late in the game, that competitive stamina that Ryan Day has been talking about ad nauseum for months on end now, the Buckeyes showed that competitive stamina easily. I'm not saying that it was an easy effort, but there was no question whether or not they could handle playing tough that late in the game. And then to have such a long, time-consuming drive end in a touchdown in which the Buckeyes ran the ball as effectively as they did, I think it just kind of made the whole end of the game feel that much sweeter. It was a tough win. It was a gritty win. Jim Knowles, passed with flying colors on his first impression for Ohio State fans. He told us after the game he expected it. And I'm glad he did, and I hope he continues to expect it. But it was still nice to see the defense with largely the same personnel we saw last year go out and look so much better here after all the work they put in the offseason. And I did think Ryan Day said something after the game that kind of gets lost a little bit. This was basically Ohio State's 4th straight game against a top 10 team. I know it doesn't feel like that when you think about the way they dismantled Michigan State, but the Spartans were really good, and they beat Michigan last year. Then to play Michigan, then to play Utah, and then to open the year with Notre Dame. Those are 4 really good teams, in consecutive order. Man, that's a tough draw. And I think the best performance of those 4 games, I know what Ohio State did to Michigan State. Yesterday's performance against Notre Dame was more impressive to me than Ohio State's whooping of Michigan State in November last year. So really good progress from Ohio State in the first game of the season. Again, I don't mean any offense to Arkansas State or Toledo, but the Buckeyes are not going to get the same kind of test these next couple weeks. And you try to stay as healthy as you can in these few games. Hopefully it's a chance for the offense to start clicking and just get some valuable rhythm before they've got to play Wisconsin. I don't mean it disrespectfully to Arkansas State or Toledo. I don't think Ohio State's going to take anybody lightly or look past them. But as a fan, you sit there and say, okay, those are wins. The Buckeyes are not going to lose to Arkansas State. They're not going to lose to Toledo. let's see what this team can accomplish before they go play a team in Wisconsin that has a pretty good chance to win the West. They're as good as anybody on that half of the Big Ten, and perhaps it could be a Big Ten championship preview. So you definitely want to have as healthy a team with hopefully 3 wins under their belt by the time they get there for the end of September. So that's the latest from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. There are still some recruits kind of roaming around here this morning on what was a very successful recruiting weekend. I saw something on Twitter that kind of made me laugh. Maybe you saw it too. It was somebody poking a little bit of fun at an unnamed school. It wasn't any one in particular, but it was the idea that, you know, a coach can recruit a kid and take him into their state-of-the-art cafeteria. Hey, look at the cafeteria that we just put together. Well, at Ohio State, LeBron James stands on the sideline, and Brian Hartline brought a whole bunch of recruits over to talk to LeBron. That probably sells itself pretty nicely. And to have all of those former Buckeyes playing in the NFL on campus for that game last night, to have your future of your program talking to the recent past and to see the celebrities and to feel that environment, gosh, I don't know how you leave a better impression than that, not to mention the way Ohio State closed out a top 5 team in the country in Notre Dame. Really, really exciting, fun night, and you can certainly feel the buzz here in Columbus with this team playing really well at the outset of the season. So tomorrow is an off day for the media. There is no media availability. Ryan Day will call into his I guess his radio show's on Thursday, but he'll call into Buckeye Roundtable for a segment tomorrow on 97.1 The Fan. So you can catch that tomorrow night. I believe that's in the 6:40 time window. Might want to check me on that, though. And then Tuesday we'll hear from Ryan Day, and I imagine we'll hear from at least one coordinator and several players, as we often do on Tuesdays, as Ohio State turns its attention to Week 2. And they try to keep on building toward what they hope will be a championship caliber season. I'm Brendan Gulick. Thanks for tuning into the Buckeye Report. Fun night last night. Ohio State 21, Notre Dame 10 in a game that was played much differently than many of us thought it would be played, but an impressive win for Ohio State as they come out with a really, really solid first impression, both locally and nationally, for the first game in 2022. We'll see you again real soon. Thanks for subscribing to our YouTube channel here on Buckeyes Now. Check out all the latest info, Buckeyes Now SI on our social media handles, and of course BuckeyesNow.com for your written content on Ohio State. See you soon.